this special city council meeting and discussion with the Board of Education. Welcome, Board of Education members, Dr. Gasper, Ms. Alfano, and members of the public. Those who don't know me, I'm Alderman McNamara from Ward 4, and we begin each council meeting with an opportunity for the public to speak. So we'll begin that now. It's now 6:01 p.m. The rules of the road are that you give your name and address clearly for the record and limit your speaking time to 3 minutes. Do we have a list or I'm just going to wing it? Just a housekeeping as we want to make remarks around the table. We have to pass the microphone around. Hello? Okay. And, but let's hear from the public. Does anybody from the public wish to speak to the council and the Board of Education? A rare opportunity. Anybody from the public? Anybody from the public? Hearing none, I'm going to close public participation, and we can begin our discussion. And I don't have an agenda in front of me, but it would be appropriate maybe for a... Oh, okay. Yeah, I do have it. Yes, thank you. All right. I'm new at this. This is my first term, everybody, okay? So, I'll ask the clerk to read the warrant for this meeting, but I'll entertain a motion from the council to waive the reading. Oh, let me open the meeting. Thank you. So I'm going to open this special meeting, Board of Ed, Common Council, for March 26. Yeah, I got it right here. Okay. And this is our joint meeting with the Board of Education. It's now 6:02 p.m. That's the briefest public participation I've ever been involved in the council. And now I'll ask the clerk to read the warrant for the meeting, and I'll entertain a motion to waive that reading.
Mr. Chair, first the roll call, and then...
Oh, yeah. See, I'm not used to that. Okay.
John, what time did you call the meeting to?
6:02.
Thank you.
I'll ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Great. Alderpersons McNamara.
Here?
Smedley. Sanchez. Beloin Saavedra.
Here.
Simpson.
Here.
Russell.
Here.
Barbosa.
Present.
Hargraves. McAdam.
Here.
Gibson.
Here.
Scott.
Here.
Connors.
Here.
Malinowski.
Here.
Pabon.
Here.
Santiago.
Present.
12 present, Mr. Majority Leader, and I think you want me to take the roll for the school board members too?
Oh, that would be good.
Okay. School board members: Listro.
Here.
Marino.
Here.
Reyes.
Here.
Kane with the C. Escobalas. Kane with a K. Parker.
Here.
Pina.
Here.
Rivera.
Here.
Santana. Okay. You got 6 members there too, so you have a quorum on both.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And now I will ask the clerk to please read the warrant for the meeting, but entertain a motion to...
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to waive the reading.
Hold on, can you put it again, camera?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to waive the reading.
Alderwoman Beloin, it's been seconded to waive the reading. All those in favor of the council?
Who seconded?
Aye.
Russell.
That was Alderman Russell, I believe, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So,
Mr. Chair,
Alderwoman Saavedra.
I make a motion to suspend Rule 7 and the rules regarding debate and Rule 9 regarding motions and amendments and standing rules to allow for open discussion of the proposed school budget for 2024-2025 fiscal year.
Second by Alderman Santiago. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's a vote. All right, now we can begin our open and informal discussion I'm grateful that we're having this before the council dives into the budget this year. And I think if there are no objections, could we have a brief overview from President Listra or Superintendent Gasper? 3 to 5 minutes, or whatever you like. Dr. Gasper? All right, so noted. Board of Education member Kane, the other Tony, right? And Santana. Dr. Gasper.
So I'm happy to give as much or as little detail as the council, the alderman present would like. I'll say that when I've given this presentation twice before, it's approximately a 25 to a 30-minute presentation. If you're asking for 3 to 5, we'll have to cut that quite short.
It's open-ended.
So I believe the context is important. It's a very, very large investment of public dollars. So I'll go as quickly as I can, and I invite people to ask questions along the way. Ms. Alfano is going to be my wing person. She's the one who knows the details, of course. My job is to tell you the story of the budget, which is the purpose of the budget narrative. So the document you have before you as the budget narrative does just that. It tells the story of the district currently and also the story of the budget request from the Board of Education. If you turn pages quickly, if you go to page 1 past the table of contents, this is the Essential 10. This is a document that I've created to guide my work and guide the work of the district. In essence, these are 10 critical areas when I arrived 21 months ago that I found in critical need for the school district. So the work of my team has been centered around these 10 areas. Quite honestly, it is, we chose the word essential on purpose. These are not fancy things. These are back to basics, building a very strong school district. And I guess I would say that about the budget in general. It would be personally much more intriguing and interesting to me as the superintendent if I were bringing you really innovative and new programs. In the year that ESSER funds are going away, once and for all, this budget really is a maintenance budget to the degree that we can, with substantial ESSER funds going away. So I believe we've done a very responsible and thoughtful job of that, and I think you'll see that throughout the presentation. On page 2, I'm not going to read to you, of course, it's a description of the budget process. Those of you who were on the council last year, this will sound familiar. Something that the district was not accustomed to was a lot of input into the budget. Principally in the past, it was made by Ms. Alfano's predecessor and the superintendent. I believe in a much more participatory budget process, so we named 40 budget owners. Every principal, every central office director, managers had a voice in helping me formulate the budget that I brought forward to the Board of Education. We've also done a prioritization process this year. We know that every budget process includes difficult decisions. The prioritization process that you'll see in the third paragraph there is something I've used in my previous work as a superintendent, and it lets us know exactly what is of greatest importance. I want to be clear on that, though. Nothing in this budget is a wish list. Everything in here is needed for children, and nothing is padded, but we do believe in our necessity to know priorities. I want you to know that those priorities go all the way down to the school level. They're not set by Ms. Alfano or me. Every budget owner of those 40 that came before Ms. Alfano and me to present their budget was required to determine things at priority level 1, 2, or 3. Moving on the next few pages, again, I'm not going to read them to you. It's about where we stand. It's the context of our public school district for the last few years. You can see trends here for high school graduation rate. In all of these charts, you'll find that New Britain is the heavy maroon line, and you'll find a number of different kinds of comparisons. You'll see the districts to which I'm comparing us. This is called DRGI, or DRG-I, District Reference Group I. And it's basically a group of cities that have similar demographics. Groups range from A to I in Connecticut, A being the most affluent districts, and I being all of the urban centers. On the right there, you'll see state test scores, how we compare to the DRGI average. Bottom left, moving on to page 4 now, you can see chronic absenteeism. And then moving on to the right, the bottom right on page 4, is students with disabilities. I'm going to pause here and ask your attention here. This is not only important about the kids we serve, but it's about the budget we're asking you for. So what is true is in one way or another, every child with a disability requires some form of extra service. That could be very, very minimal services, all the way up to an outplacement. A child for whom we cannot provide services here in the district, a child who gets outplaced, that individual child, a single child, can cost between $150,000 and $225,000 for a single child. So as the overall rate of students with disabilities goes up, so does our financial obligation to provide services to those kids.
Is this the full term?
Go ahead.
Is this the full 12 years that the child required for the services, or is it that you're saying from concern?
So it's whenever that child becomes identified as a child with special needs. Some students are identified as early as kindergarten, or even earlier than that. They come to us with special needs in pre-K, all the way through graduation, and it's actually past graduation. State law has been revised. It's now until the child finishes the school year of their 22nd birthday. So they will have already perhaps received, their full education at New Britain High School. We remain responsible for services until the child completes the school year of their 22nd birthday.
Thank you.
Mr. Spalding, did I say that correctly? Right. Thank you. Again, just moving on, more context for you, going as quickly as I can, just to save our time for conversation. Similar to students with special needs, we have a growing population of multilingual learners, formerly called ELL or TESOL. The proper nomenclature now is multilingual learners. You can see the state average is below 10%. We have nearly 1 in 5 students in our school district as a multilingual learner. Now, that's great for how vibrant and diverse our districts are, but our district is, but also in a way that's somewhat similar to special ed. Every child who's determined to be a multilingual learner does get additional services of some kind. So much like the special ed number, this is a service, an expense to the school district that we must address by law that is different than probably towns that are right next to us. Towns like Cheshire probably have a much lower rate of multilingual learners than we. So it's important when you hear about different budgets in different municipalities that you remember the context for us is quite different. On the right is a historical trend of...
Dr. Gasper, I'm going to
Please.
stop you just for a second, because, so about 18% is multilingual, and then I'm flipping back to students with disabilities, that's 21%. You have almost 40% of the student population that needs something beyond the regular classroom teacher.
Some of those students would be duly identified, but in essence, your point is correct. In essence, your point is correct. Absolutely, thank you. Moving to the right, general enrollment. This is the trend through last school year, and I'll tell you so far this school year enrollment is up approximately 2.5% over last school year. So my prediction and the prediction we've gotten from experts is the district's enrollment will remain flat over time. As we've constructed schools, part of the school construction process is we have to get school enrollment projections, and those projections are believed to be flat over time. So my belief is we'll hover somewhere between the 9,000 to 10,000 student range for the coming years. Some more context, more specific to schools now, and this was really more for the board's consumption, but I kept it here out of full transparency to you. How is class size looking across the district? You can see there's some variability. Some of our schools have smaller class size. We've begun talking with the board about it will be time soon to perhaps rezone our schools and or think more broadly about how we use our school buildings. Please.
Is this on?
Well, you asked him to pass it, you not check to see the...
He did successfully pass it. These numbers on the very bottom and the very right, I'm assuming these are averages?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
Just for the record, Alderman Scott is here. I don't think you're in the roll call.
Dr. Gasper, as long as we're on class size there for a minute, does the
Yes.
teacher contract still include an payout if the class sizes go beyond a certain level?
That is correct, it does. They are limited to 25 for the earliest grades and 27 thereafter.
And is it still 2 over before it triggers the payout?
Yes.
Okay, so later when we talk about the budget, I'm going to ask you how you manage the oversized and trying to not get there, so we reduce those payouts.
That is correct, thank you. Moving on now, kind of, let's get more into nuts and bolts about the money and the expenses. So really now moving on to exactly how we are staffed and what those people look like. So across the top of the next 2 pages, page 7, left to right is a comparison of the current school year versus the coming school year. So on the left, you'll see how the staff is broken out by unit. Independent is first, and then local 51 are our administrators, 871 are teachers, 2407 is our para-educators, 1186 is a little bit of a mishmash of a unit with custodians, nurses, IT support are mixed into that unit, among others. And local 818 is our smallest unit, and those are managers of different sorts. I always pause here because I like to answer questions before you ask them, perhaps, and this will be my 9th presentation of a budget by a superintendent. And every year there's a question about, aren't you top-heavy? The answer is no. We are approximately 4% management. 4% management. So if you, I'm not an expert in any other department except for my own, but I would invite you to compare that to private industry and/or any other departments. That imputes approximately what's called a management span of 1 to 25. So anybody who might be a manager, that averages out to about 25 supervisees. And again, I would invite you to compare that to other departments and/or the private sector. Did I predict anybody's question?
Not mine.
Okay.
Just for the record, Alderwoman Sanchez has joined us.
Thank you. It would be a strange budget year if a stakeholder didn't ask the superintendent that. It's a very, very common question.
I was going to ask you a question, that maybe now is not the time, just about the reduction of staff. So it looks like in almost every category, you're losing staff people from 2023 to the 24-25. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like, the loss of staff?
Absolutely. If, I'll just ask your patience. I think that's covered at a later page. Absolutely. And if it's not, please do restate your question.
Thank you.
On the right, you'll see proposed for next year, so you'll get a very clear picture of how things are shifting. I think the quick answer that we'll get to later from Alderwoman Bowen Savage's question is ESSER monies, and that's spelled out in a separate slide later. So that's where the people are, meaning what types of people they are. And if you move to the bottom of these 2 pages, page 8 on the left is the same data, but now by funding source. Rather than being sorted by employee type, now they're sorted by from where is their salary funded. So you'll see general fund, ECS 2% set aside, that's state money, Alliance District is state money, Title I is a federal grant, IDEA, federal grant, ESSER, the COVID recovery monies, and you can see currently 120 people employed through those monies, and then other. Other would be smaller grants, smaller points of revenue. And now if you look off to the right, you'll see proposed for next year, and I would bring your attention to the summary at the bottom of each of those charts. Moving from 1,618 staff members to 1,533. This is why I said in my opening, I would love it if I felt this was a year to bring really innovative and new programs to the Board of Education and to you, but I didn't feel that was appropriate in a year when so many positions would be going away out of necessity. I'll just say for context, prior to my arrival, the district had hired 300 people with the ESSER monies. I knew this before I applied for the job. I knew it would be a challenge. I knew that I would have to work closely with the Board of Education on that. And I'll get to that later on a little bit more. No question. Please.
So I noticed that to the left, you had the ESSER, which was 120 employees. And so now we're 0. But I noticed that looks like you moved in around about 100 or so into the other departments, is that from the 120? Or is it just other?
So overall, we're down
Yeah,
by almost 100.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're reducing by, I think it's 86. It's on a separate slide later,
Okay.
and I think I'll talk you through that. I thank you for your patience, and if I don't answer your question, please do ask again. So, again, this chart is meant to tell you in full transparency how the people are funded, and to give you as much detail as possible. The next page continues to give you more information about staffing, where you can see rises and increases. We wanted to give you as much historical perspective. You can pick the type of administrator, and you can track them from left to right over time. You can see rises and falls in each of those categories. What I've just begun speaking with the board about this year is also thinking about staffing from an equitable perspective, meaning, are we just putting the same amount of, for example, instructional coaches into each building, or are we thinking about the differences in the size between Smalley School and North End School? And we're going to have to keep thinking about that more and more. It certainly was a consideration in formulating this budget. You should also know that some of our programs that you'll see here are very specific. For example, you'll notice the Transition Center near the bottom is all in green. Well, that's a specialized school for students with specialized needs, and it has the smallest student ratio on purpose. So, moving on to the bottom left now, I'm on page 10 on the left, personnel and program changes, non-ESSER. These are recommendations I've made to the board. The board has adopted and chosen to move forward to you as part of this recommended budget. So we have a program currently in our school district called Small Classroom Setting. I'm not here to cast aspersions on those who created the program. It did serve kids well, but what we've come to learn is it's not in compliance with up-to-date guidelines on special education, and in this case, regular education. On top of that, there's currently only 7 students in that program. So we believe that we can comply better with best practices on special ed and also reallocate. Something we did last year was use some of our ESSER monies to move our students who are on expulsion out of the Boys and Girls Club to our own facility. We used ESSER funds for that. We got good services from the Boys and Girls Club. We were paying, though, approximately $100,000 a year to lease 2 classrooms there. What most people don't understand is when a child is expelled, we still have to educate them fully, just in a different spot. So we used ESSER funds to renovate what was previously called the Butler Building behind Pulaski School. So now it's a program and it's a site fully within our control. It looks like a school. I toured there just a couple weeks ago. But we do have approximately anywhere from about 35 to sometimes as many as 55 students at a time on expulsion. I don't enjoy expelling students, but it's something that I feel is necessary when a student does something that's potentially dangerous to, for example, the other 2,300 kids at New Britain High School. So with one program becoming very small, the other program becoming very big, this is a net change of 0, moving an administrator from one program to another. Also here with no financial impact, but really interesting to talk about is, but there is, actually I should say, there is some budget impact. So that Alliance number, which is a big chunk of our revenue, there's a mandate that we have to set aside a certain amount for increasing educator diversity. And Dr. Sanders does an excellent job of overseeing those programs. So we're creating a teacher apprentice program, AKA Grow Your Own. So we can take the people who are perhaps already working for us as paraeducators or other folks and help them on their way to earning a teaching certificate. So funding that is a critical program change for us. Now to some of the questions from earlier. On the right, the ESSER-funded positions that I am recommending some of these for retention and why. So as I said, upon my arrival, the district employed approximately 300 people with those ESSER dollars. And it was very unpopular, but at this time last year, I told those 40 budget owners, that means every principal, every central office director, I gave them a mandate. Last year, their task was to reduce their ESSER staff by half. And every single one of them gave me a very good reason why they needed that staff, and those staff were performing really good tasks. But what I didn't want was for us to go from 300 to 0. So they had concerns, they had questions, but I was strict with them. I said, either you're going to make this recommendation or I'm going to cut because it's in the best interest of the school district. It's not fun, but it's what was needed to be done. And then again, so that leaves us kind of, we took it in two chunks rather than one big chunk. So the budget for which we're planning now is the first year without the ESSER funds. So we went from approximately 300 to approximately half of that to zero in the currently planned budget. However, it's not zero yet. I'm recommending to the board and hereby recommending to you that we do maintain a small number. Out of the total 300 that we started with, I'm recommending retaining 39. And these are some of the justifications why. As you've seen during my 21 months here, we've made a very, very large emphasis on communications. So these are positions that were funded by ESSER. They help us not only with getting communications out, the planned communications, the district dispatch newsletter, the social media, letters to families, staff celebrations, student celebrations, but they also deal with emergency communications. When something scary happens in a school, we always send a letter home. And also, most especially for our two Arabic-speaking communication people, is they go to family meetings, they go to night meetings, they go to PPTs to help ensure that our Arabic-speaking population feels connected to the school. So I'm recommending keeping one of our Spanish-speaking communication special assistants and two of the Arabic-speaking. And you'll see I'm here telling you to where they would move, not moving in this case to local, moving from the ESSER fund to Alliance.
So how many, sorry,
Please.
how many Spanish-speaking workers you have now, besides those three? I mean, besides that one that you're,
So in the communications department, we have a lesser need for Spanish speakers because we have a good amount of Spanish speakers out at the schools.
okay.
So we don't have a good amount of Arabic speakers out at the schools. So we have teachers and family school liaisons and social workers and paraeducators out at the schools, many of whom we're lucky to have a good, strong number of Spanish speakers there. They can help with some of those things.
Okay, so you're saying by removing, but you still have the recovery by having other employees that speak Spanish?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And they've been doing that work for a long time, well before ESSER, and they do it well. What's new is the Spanish-speaking assistant at central office. Previously, that was done by paying stipends for working after hours to several people around central office. I believe that the job deserves to be done by somebody who's dedicated to doing it well. So that's my recommendation to the board and hereby to the council to keep that person. Again, not moving it to the local budget, which you're deliberating tonight, it's moving it to one of our state grants, the Alliance grant. De Loretto School was provided with an additional assistant principal with the ESSER money. Prior to that, I've heard stories that at one point they had 2 assistant principals, then they had 1, and then with the ESSER monies, they brought it back to 2. De Loretto School needs 2 assistant principals. De Loretto School is just as large as Slade or Pulaski, approximately 800 kids at that school. When you think of all of the meetings and the parent contacts and staff evaluations that have to happen, De Loretto School does need a second assistant principal. That's my recommendation there. We had a large number of what we called TAs, teacher assistants that were hired under ESSER. They filled a variety of roles throughout the schools. All of those are going away in this proposal except for those that were bilingual teaching assistants. And they need to stay in the budget because, as I said earlier, those are legally mandated services for which we simply don't have enough and can't recruit enough certified bilingual teachers. It's a mandated service by law. The BTAs, the bilingual teaching assistants, help us comply with state law on providing services to multilingual learners. A few more of the retentions from ESSER are at the top of the next page, on page 11. It's no secret that from time to time we struggle with student conduct. One thing, and I will take full responsibility, this is an addition that I requested to spend ESSER money on upon my arrival, and the board supported that about a year and a half ago. I perceived that both Slade and Pulaski needed more help with student supervision. We added CSOs, campus safety officers. I believe it's in our best interest to maintain those at least. So again, moving those from, in this case, ESSER to the local budget. Similarly, we have deans at the high school and at Slade for behavioral support. Again, based on what we see of conduct of some of our students, I believe that this is money well spent. And again, moving from ESSER to local. The reason you don't see Pulaski in that count is Pulaski does have a dean that's provided through their SIG grant, I believe, Ms. Alfano, through their school improvement grant. So they have that person, that service already, but just provided through non-local funds. We hired 3 people in a position called Supervisor of Custodians under ESSER. They're all 3 are doing good work. When we have them, we've had some people come and go. I would like to maintain all 3, but a reasonable recommendation from me to the board and to you is to keep at least one of those. We have aging buildings, despite really nice renovations that we do. Every other building in the district is getting to a point where it's aging, and keeping up to date and oversight of our custodial staff members is a needed service here. Instructional coaches, we've just begun, and I'm going to go off script here a little bit, and I'll say my colleagues and I, Ms. Burdolo who's here, Mr. Richardson who's here, Ms. Velasquez and I, we're starting to see the change in how our teachers teach our kids. It's going to take a much longer, it's just beginning, but the coaches play a critical role in that. We want to make sure our teachers feel like they're supported, that they're getting training and up-to-date teaching methods. Instructional coaches are a key piece of that. Many of them were hired under ESSER. I want to keep as many as possible. I think a reasonable recommendation here is to keep 3, moving them to the Alliance grant, not into the local funds. And it's a curious decision to me that a special ed teacher was hired under ESSER. We need every single special education teacher we can get, so this is critical. Before I move on to the chart, I just draw your attention to the asterisk at the bottom left of that page. There are some other budgetary changes. I want to be transparent with you, but they don't have a budgetary impact. Personnel changes, excuse me, but they don't have a budgetary impact. So what does that all mean? If you take a look at the top right of page 11, I'm recommending keeping a total of 39 of the original 300 ESSER positions. You'll see moving the vast majority of those to the state Alliance grant, 30 FTEs for approximately $2.5 million. 9 of those would go to the general fund for approximately $500,000.
Dr. Gasper, can I ask you one question?
Of course.
In terms of losing those positions, how is that affecting your budget for unemployment compensation?
Ms. Alfano?
Yes, so there is an impact on the budget. Not knowing exactly what it is at this time, as we are trying to place these positions in vacancies that are occurring and hopefully will continue to occur, or these staff members will find employment elsewhere. So I don't have an exact number, but we have budgeted, or we are planning for additional unemployment costs.
So in this budget right now, how much did you anticipate in the budget that's before the board and us?
I can give you that. So currently, I'm anticipating $120,000 in unemployment.
Thank you.
Moving on also.
Dr. Gasper, the 39 positions you want to retain that was funded by the COVID, the ESSER money, all of them, do you consider mission critical? You're a budget that you can only sustain the status quo with. Are they all mission critical?
Without exaggeration, I would say all those and more. All of these people are currently performing a useful service to the kids of New Britain. However, it's it's one of those impossible no-win tasks that a superintendent has to do to make these very difficult decisions. We tried to minimize the impact where we could. We tried to think of how can we train up existing staff to perhaps fill the gaps with skill rather than with people. But it truly is an impossible task. Again, and it's, I don't call any fault to the hiring of these people. Everybody that was hired on performed a task that was of service to the kids. But I'm forced to make what I deem to be a reasonable recommendation to the Board of Education and tonight to you. So, yes, I would say those 39 and more, we would, they would all, if we had 50 or 60 or 100 staff retained, they would all be providing services that were good for kids next year. Just below that number is you'll see the detail of those 86.5 positions that are eliminated, totaling $6.1 million of ESSER funds going away. Again, it's sobering. I hope, sometimes I speak too quickly and I give the impression that this was an easy task. It most certainly was not. It most certainly was not. And to Ms. Alfano's point, we have and have had a number of vacancies in our district. We're hoping to maintain some of these good people. We've always had a roster of, I would say, somewhere, Dr. Sanders, somewhere between 20 to 40 paraeducator openings that we're hoping some of these good people will choose to apply for. So we're hoping that this doesn't result in so much unemployment. And some of these, quite frankly, were paraeducators and they chose to explore a different role under the ESSER money. We're hoping that they go back to being paraeducators. So it's sobering. As your superintendent, I don't enjoy proposing any budget that cuts this many positions, this many people. It weighs on me heavily. But again, it's the reality of a very large sum of money that was temporary, and we knew it was temporary all along, that large sum of money going away. Again, kept here for your transparency, but not put forward by the board, as I did last year. In my opinion, it's quite uncommon that our elementary schools do not have some form of security officer at them, unarmed security officer at them. If you look at other districts where I've worked and other surrounding districts, there's typically some form of security support that observes the front door, signs in visitors, secures the perimeter. So I made this recommendation last year to the board and again this year, and I very much understand why the board chose not to add it to the budget. It is a very costly item, but it's maintained here for your transparency. It is not included in the financials of this budget, the addition of those folks. On the bottom left, I think I've already talked to you about that, how we plan for the ESSER money, the going to half. Recommended capital budget request, that's already been transmitted to the city. Some investments in the New Britain High School training room, and also a replace and upgrade the musical equipment fleet for our students.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Back when I was on the Board of Education, we had a fantastic partnership with VH1, and they came into the district and provided thousands of dollars worth of instruments. So where is the school district currently with that partnership with VH1 and being able to bring in other entrepreneurs that will support?
So to my knowledge, nothing of that scope is available. Leona Clerkin does an excellent job of overseeing the fine arts department. She's not brought forward to me any such opportunities. Of course, we pursue them. We did receive a grant last year, no? For some instruments, or am I mistaken?
I think your predecessor eliminated the program, but prior to her being superintendent, there was a really fantastic, vibrant program with VH1 that supplied all the elementary schools with new musical instruments, as well as a keyboard classroom at Hal's and some other really valuable things. It would be nice, and Leona was part of that, so it would be nice to see if VH1 was still interested in partnering with New Britain. Mr. Salina has advanced knowledge on that too, that he could be a great resource.
Sure, thank you. So now wrapping up, if you turn to page 13, you'll see a summary, and again, in full transparency, we want to show you an all funds budget. So this is all the money. whether it's from local or otherwise. What I would bring your attention to is the dark blue, the largest piece of the pie, is the general fund. What our request of you is $133,287,680. For your context, though, what's important for you to know is more than half of that comes to you in revenue. So of the 133 million, approximately 55% of that is given to the city in the form of ECS, education cost share. So as you contemplate, and it's your very difficult job to contemplate the impact on the taxpayers of New Britain, it's important context for you to know that of the 133 million that we're requesting, 45% of that is from local taxpayers. The remaining 55% or so is from ECS, education cost share. And in addition to that, in the gray section, that's the Alliance grant. That's also state money. So, yes, the request of 133 million is large. We take that seriously, but also I wanted you to know, if you're not familiar, perhaps if you're new to the council, that the ECS grant to the city is substantial. You'll see that both in chart format and in the table on the left.
I'm going to weigh in on that one, too. Having worn both hats, I was on the Board of Ed for 12 years, so I know all too well about presenting to the council and looking for funds. But I do want to say, when we're talking about the ECS, that 2% set aside that is now naturally, the Board of Ed takes it every year and has been doing that for probably the last 15 years, is a loss of revenue for the city. So I just want to identify that people around the table understand that we may give, as you have listed here, 55.2 million of local taxpayer money, but when you take the 2% set aside, that's revenue that the board doesn't get directly in ECS and still has to, I mean, not the board, that the city council doesn't get directly in revenue and has to make it up through local funds. So I just want to, in the spirit of transparency and where the money is coming and how it moves, I just want to make sure people know that although from the board's perspective, the 2% is state money, from the city revenue side, it's a loss of revenue for us that we make up through municipal dollars.
And I would like to say in response to that, for many, many years, we didn't get that money. And no matter whether we got it or not, whatever you all did for us was the same, which wasn't as supportive as you should have. So yes, we may be getting that money now, but we didn't get it for a really long time, and it didn't make a difference in what you gave.
So, Ms. Parker, you've been getting it for at least 15 years, because I was on the Board of Ed when we took the very first vote to take the 2%, and almost lost my head from city government for doing that. So it's been at least 15 years, and I'm glad to see, going through your budget, that the 2% set aside is still being dedicated to kindergarten teachers, because that was the rationale we used to take the money from the city in the first place. And I'm not here to argue whether we do or not. I wanted to be transparent about how that 2% take affects the city budget, that's all.
Make sure everything's
Yeah, I'd like the superintendent to finish his presentation, but I might add, I was involved in an analysis last year of local aid to education. In that same period, the ECS, as imperfect as it is, has increased close to 60% for the city. And the analysis shows that year after year of flat funding education, I just want to share with my colleagues on the council, actually the ability to make public investments in our children's schools, taking inflation into account, has dropped close to 20%. I'm sure you knew this before you took the job, but
That was part of my budget presentation last year, was the impact of inflation on a flat-funded local budget.
yeah, and yeah, I would note this year's, I've been reviewing the Board of Finance and Taxation, and history is repeating itself in terms of, you asked for that $5 million, and I think you've already established $700,000 more as all mission critical. And the Board of Finance and Taxation gave you nothing. So now we await the budget of the mayor, and we await the work ahead of the council with, I hope all my colleagues, I'm sure the Board of Ed is aware of it, to look at these numbers, real numbers, in terms of what kind of investment we can within the limits of our 17th century property tax. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, we're close to done. I appreciate the patience of everyone at the table. On page 14 is some more context for everyone. And people who are less familiar with the budgeting process may not appreciate the impact of contractual cost increases. Other than changing the number of employees we have, the board has very little control over big chunks of our budget. So we've made an attempt here to lay that out for you. So teachers, the budgeted amount in fiscal year '24, '25, the increase, and then what that contractual percentage has. I'll say we're not decreasing, in this case, teachers. We're moving them out of the local budget, so that's why that one looks negative. But you can see everything from administrators to paraeducators to transportation operates on a contract for which the increase for next year is already defined. So fringe benefits being one of the biggest ones there, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Utilities, these are all locked-in cost increases. We can certainly have an impact on that. We could turn all of our thermostats down to 55 degrees, and then every mom and dad would be calling us about that. But it's important for you to know that we can't just choose to pay our employees less next year. We can't choose to spend, give our bus company less next year. Many of the biggest chunks of our budget are already locked into contracts for which the increases next year are already defined.
Do you have any current contract negotiations going on?
We are current.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any current contract negotiations in
We are
progress?
currently negotiating with 1186. We're near the end of that process. However, we also do have 2 new units that just unionized earlier this year. Overall cost changes are shown for you here at the bottom. I guess what I want to point out here is, and I failed to do so, I want to thank our communications department, most especially Powell Figat, who makes this document look as beautiful as it does. So you'll notice the top, it says 5.27% increase in contractual, but the overall is 4.6. That's because we moved some things out of local into other funding sources. So this request is for a 4.6% budget increase, and you can see how that lays out through the different budget series. Now, in an effort to be kind of user-friendly, you'll see we've combined some things in here. So, for example, I like to call some things from the 300 and the 800 series operating costs. You've got the full detail in the full packet of the budget, but to make this document more user-friendly, the increases and changes are laid out like that. Again, I want to bring really strong attention to the fringe benefits that was spelled out above. Nearly, I should say more than a $5 million projected increase just in benefits. And again, I want to call that out because that's basically our whole request. It's almost the size of our full request before we do some of the offsets of some of the cuts. Now, Ms. Alfano and her team does an excellent job at that. This is not creative thinking, and it's not, a guess. It's not like going to the casino and hoping that you hit the jackpot. Our consultants, which are the same consultants as they are for the city, Lockton, gives Ms. Alfano a cost per employee, and she simply does the multiplication. Now, we're hoping, but there is no guarantee, that as we get further into budget season, we get an updated and it's lower. But for right now, this is the honest estimate based on our insurance consultants to say this is what you should budget per employee. So you can see a $5 million increase, just $5.4 million increase just in fringe benefits. Our total requested increase is $5.7 million. Again, these are contracted benefits that we don't have the right to change. Moving on to page 15, again, getting close, but now we're getting into a little more of that context. Thank you again for your patience. I appreciate your attention. I don't live in New Britain, but I'm certainly a taxpayer myself, and I know what it's like to have my taxes go up. So the question I always ask every single time I propose a budget to a board or to city government is to ask myself, are we living within our means? Is this reasonable, is a question I ask myself over and over again based on the characteristics of the city for which I work. So what you see on the left is an abridged list of every single school district in the state and what they spend per child. Now, I can't list 166. The full list is a public document. You can find it on the state website. But this takes you from the top. So the town in Connecticut that spends the most per child is Sharon. Sharon's a tiny little town, and they choose not to regionalize. And the residents of that town choose to spend this much money on their children so they don't have to regionalize. So they spend $48,000 per child.
Gets you to be you.
Yeah, exactly. Ranging down to the bottom, there's different number of school districts in Connecticut, whether you count the charter schools as their own district or not. This is the list I choose to use, 166 school districts. Danbury is at the bottom. Danbury spends $14,600 per child. We are just a few notches up from the bottom. So this is the most recent publicly available data in all cases. So our current budget is $15,768 per child. You can see a good ways up in the bold green is the state median. The state median per child is $20,615. The light green are the other districts that are in our group, the DERG I, the other urban centers. So you see Hartford ranks 57th in the state, New London 89th, Wyndham 101st, New Haven 107, Bridgeport 159, Waterbury 160, and we rank 163rd out of 166. So then, again, I try to have this make sense for me, and I try to compare in a way that makes sense. And here I jokingly, and Ms. Alfano allows me, I jokingly say that I invented some math. So what I try to do is ask myself, so what would it take to fund each New Britain child at the same level as some of these other districts? What would that look like? So here's the math, and it's explained to you. You can poo-poo it, you can say I don't believe you, and you can, I don't know, do your own math. But this is how I choose to do this comparison. So let's look at Hartford. It was the highest ranked in our group. Hartford spends $22,330 per Hartford child. That is $6,562 more per child than us. So to control for size, because obviously they're much larger, I take that 6,500 number and I multiply by our number of kids. So they spend 6,562 per child more than us. If you take 6,562 and you multiply it by the 9,700 kids we have, it means this. If we were to fund each New Britain child at the same level that Hartford funds each Hartford child, you'd have to add nearly $64 million to New Britain's school budget.
So the state median, if you had that in a more perfect world, wouldn't even cover mission critical, in your view?
If we chose to fund, and this obviously is not the budget request this year, but if we chose to add $47 million to the New Britain school budget so that we could say we funded at the median level, it would transform the district. It would transform the district, what we could do with $47 million, right? If you want me to come back and give you a plan for $47 million, I'll do it. I'll do it. But to me, this is the most important chart of my talk with you tonight, is you all, whether you're a Board of Education member or an alderperson, you report to your constituents. And if you choose to change our budget, increase our budget, people are going to ask you hard questions. They're going to bother you in the supermarket, they're going to bother you at church, they're going to bother you when you're walking your dog at night, they're going to text you and say, this is ridiculous, my taxes are high enough. I understand, I pay taxes too. So the point of this chart is reasonableness. So again, let's pick one in the middle. If we were to fund each New Britain child at the level that each Wyndham child is funded, you'd have to add nearly $38 million to our budget. So again, we're not asking for $38 million, but I'm trying to predict the questions you will be asked in line at the supermarket, when you're standing at the gas pump, when you're trying to get your kids to soccer practice or whatever, wherever you're headed, and people are bothering you, asking you hard questions. They should ask us hard questions. It's a lot of money. But is it a lot of money when you compare it to districts that have similar demographics as we are? My answer is no.
Well, Nate, and then I'd like maybe President Listo or somebody from the Board of Education might want to chime in as well, but go ahead, Nate.
I just have some numbers questions here. The chart on the right has this note saying corrected for enrollment. Can you explain what that correction was to get these figures?
Yeah, so that's what I mean by multiplying by our number of kids. So Hartford's budget is much more than $63 million greater than ours. So the way in which I'm using math to correct for enrollment is not by showing you Hartford's total budget, taking the difference and multiplying by our number of kids. And again, there may be, if there's a mathematician in the room, they may have a more eloquent way of doing the math, but this is, so in essence, it's the difference between what this city spends per child and what we spend per child, multiplied by our number of children. So again, just because it's the top line, Hartford spends 6,562 more for every one of their children than we have for one of our children. And again, they're getting approximately the same grants and the same entitlements as we are, the Alliance and the Title I and the ID. They're getting commensurate amounts of money, so it's a relatively good comparison. I don't know what they get for other types of municipal support, if they're getting more monies for other city needs. I'm not a specialist in that. So that's what I mean by corrected for, my attempt to correct for district size or enrollment is by multiplying by our number of kids. Take the difference multiplied by our number of kids.
Thank you. And so this chart on the left, the 15,768, that figure can be translated to compare for this chart on the right.
Correct. Now, keeping in mind that none of these numbers are for the proposed fiscal year. These are wherever available. Sometimes they're the most recent fiscal year that's closed. Sometimes the most recent publicly available data such as this is 2 years old, but wherever we're making these comparisons, we're pulling from the most recently available public data, usually from Department of Education or DAS, or maybe OPM, some of these numbers might come from. So that's where we're getting these numbers from.
I don't want to
just-
put anybody on the spot, but I'd like to hear from our Board of Ed members to talk about the budget you approved, but I'm sorry, Sean.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to, while we were on the topic of per pupil expenditure, I just want everyone to understand that's not actually what's spent on each and every child in New Britain. You take the sum total of your budget and divide by the number of students, because your outplaced student might be getting $150,000 in their education. Somebody else might have a one-to-one paraprofessional in the school district. So you might have a singular student that's costing $50,000 in-house. So this is just the average of the number of students divided by the bottom line, not the actual expense per student in the district.
That's exactly correct, and it's also based on the local contribution. In all these cases, it doesn't include the other grants and such. Yep.
Thank you.
Jose?
Yeah, so, the same as you guys, I had the similar concerns until we went through the whole package that Dr. Gaspar put together with his team. And when we got to this particular page is what got me. And I understand, you know, the fact that some children might cost more than was projected here, but that also highlights the fact that the necessity of this budget. And I'm sure I'm probably jumping the gun, but the initial presentation to the Board of Education, we were going to be over by, I believe it was 8.something%, which was $11.4 million. And thankfully, the Alliance grant gave us a little more, so that brought that down drastically. As a father of 6, soon to be having 4 children in the district, I'm looking forward to the council approving this. Because of the hard work that Dr. Gaspar and his staff put into this, the dedication and the research, I have not seen that type of dedication in years, being a father. So I really do hope the council takes this into consideration. And I know it's a big amount, I know the impact they might have with taxpayers, but as a taxpayer myself and a father, I don't mind taking the hit.
Tony? Oh, I'm sorry, Tony?
This one doesn't move so well.
As the chair of finance, before we vote on the budget, I went through that budget line item by line item, spent a couple nights getting dreary-eyed looking at it. I can tell you that we did try to find every possible cut we can, and I will give Dr. Gasper and a lot of credit on it. I remember my first meeting, first budget presented to us, I asked Dr. Gasper's predecessor when she told us about the ESSER funds, and it was going to be going away in 3 years, and she mentioned that there were 300 positions. I asked her, so what are you going to do in the 3 years when it comes up? And her exact words were, well, we'll just have that conversation when it happens. Well, Dr. Gasper, when I asked him that same question when we were interviewing him, he started a game plan right away before we even hired him, looking at, well, how these are being cut. So he's looked at every possible way. He's looked at positions, he's looked at evaluating, he's looked at cost savings where he can. I mean, you mentioned the Butler building, he looked at ways of moving. For example, he looked at, we were spending money on expulsion, expelled kids at the Boys and Girls Club. He looked at a way we could save money on that. Right now, he's looking at ways that we could take the kids that we are outplacing, special ed, ways we could move it back into district, ways that we really need to have these services for the kids. There's a way we can service them in-house. So if he's presenting a budget right now, trust me, he is right now the current way, the cheapest way possible, and he is looking at making it more efficient. So next year, if you approve this budget, next year, I'm sure it'll even possibly be even lower possibly. He's trying.
Ms. Santana? You need a mic.
I know, right? I'm just waiting for like music to start, that's all I'm saying, okay? Because I'm gonna go run in your seat.
That's after the meeting.
But it's coming, there's hope. So what I wanted to say was, I too share with Board Member Rivera. I actually have 4 children in our school district, and I am one of those parents who has 4 special needs kids. Where my story is different is because when we're looking at these numbers, I know that it's not 15,768 for my child or children who are in pathways. There's additional staff, so I already know that that's not the bottom line. What I can tell you as a parent is that I appreciate that Dr. Gasper challenged me as a parent to make sure that I was taking a long, hard look at what my kids were doing in school, what their day looked like, and how that translated above and beyond. They're not just numbers. As a taxpayer in New Britain, I'll pay a little bit more if it means that we're going to be able to make it. And that really is because Dr. Gasper actually walked us through this as he is taking the time to do that now with you. He has throughout the, and you will never hear a single day him saying not to cheerlead for New Britain, because he is cheerleading for New Britain every single day. He asks of us to think outside of the box, to bring our ideas, regardless, to actually challenge other parents in the district. So we are looking our left, our right at the other parents and saying, hey, what else can you do, and try to be as collaborative in spirit as we could be. And you know, I argue. I want to know. But I do. I ask questions, and he gets me to a yes every single time. Inflation kicked us all in the butt. The costs that we know are coming, I can just tell you, I voted no when she said she wanted to hire 300 people. I said, well, how do you get, I know how long it takes for me to get rid of family members after the holidays, you know? I start hiding coffee.
Don't go there, Tina.
You know what I mean? How do you, and these are people who need a job, right? We're all
okay.
worthy of
All right.
employment.
Thank you.
We're all challenged
Thank
that
you.
way. Thank you.
President Listo, would you make a comment if you want?
I believe this is a really fair budget, and I do agree with the comments made by other board members. I do want to point out, though, and the council has heard this before, that when you adopt a budget, it's a reflection of your values. And if you look on this list of comparable cities, they face similar issues as New Britain does. However, it appears to me that many of these towns and cities do invest more in education and therefore value education more. Because New Britain has been at the bottom of this, not just this year or last year, but for the past 5 years.
Could I just jump in terms of the magnet schools and the students who go to the classical magnet in Hartford and other? I got a call a few years ago from a Board of Ed member in Hartford saying, New Britain hasn't, and I was a citizen at that point, they haven't paid their, respecting the choice of students being able to go to those magnets, what's the cost to our budget?
So thank you for the segue. My last page includes that information.
Just as we rehearsed.
Includes that. So if you look at page 16, you'll see an overall summary of the proposed budget. Something I like to emphasize here is the small yellow circle on the left. My analysis as a superintendent is over 90% of this proposed budget is either mandatory or contractual in nature, meaning we've got less than 10% to play with, right? So the 10% would be things like, well, how much copy paper do we buy? Dry erase markers, art supplies. Everything else is a salary or a contracted service or a mandatory service like special education or multilingual learners. That's what you'll see there at the bottom. To answer your question, at the top right of page 16, about halfway down the chart, you'll see Craig Magnet School tuition, an increase of 2.2% for $2.9 million that we pay in tuition, and we do pay our bills on time. 2.2%, I'm sorry, that's 2.2% of the overall budget, I think is what's shown there, not increase. Pardon me, I'll correct myself, that's 2.2% of the overall budget, meaning $2.9 million that we pay in tuition.
How about any, Alderman Pabon?
Maybe I can speak without the mic. Do we know if we're going to get any more money from the state?
So that's what we heard earlier. I believe it was Mr. Rivera mentioned it. So yes, and I'm very happy to report that we have approximately $4 million more coming in alliance funds. That is what took us from, my original presentation to the board was 8.6% increase. Subsequent to that presentation, we got confirmation. It wasn't easy. Ms. Alfano had to put in about 5 phone calls to the state just to get them to confirm the money that we have coming to us. It shouldn't be that hard. So that additional $4 million was factored into the budget, taking us from an 8.6% request to a 4.6% request.
Now, is that money that's owed to us?
So the Alliance Fund is, how shall I say? The Alliance Fund is a cousin to ECS. It's a form of ECS. So what I would call traditional ECS comes to the municipality to help the municipality offset the cost. When the Alliance grant was begun, it came with legislation that said any further increases in ECS go in the chunk called Alliance.
Yep.
So ECS plus Alliance is kind of the total state contribution to offset the cost of educating kids. And again, these other districts we're talking about in Durg I are all getting a commensurate amount as we. They're getting the same benefit. So yes, I'm happy to report that we did get more money. And that's really thanks to the legislature who pushed hard to do what's kind of called a catch-up. They're trying to accelerate the funding formula for the towns that need it the most. You may hear that referred to as there is ECS winners, us, and ECS losers. I moved across that fence when I moved from my previous district to my current district, right? But I say that in true kind of compassion. The state isn't necessarily increasing the pot. they're redistributing the ingredients that are already in the pot. So there's plenty of towns in the state that are losing ECS money so that towns like ours get more. We're happy to get that much more, but it's important that we know just kind of the context behind it.
Yeah, to follow with Dr. Gasper, Willie, I believe in the current state budget, we're in the biennial, ECS grant for New Britain is supposed to be $115,500,000 ECS. As I alluded to earlier, as imperfect as we know ECS is, that Alderman Saavedra can speak to, that has steadily increased since 2014, and I hope we can take the long view as a common council in agreement with the Board of Education that this is a 10-year issue of flat funding to which our schools, in terms of being able to make investments, has fallen behind by $25 or $26 million. And I'd be happy to share that analysis with anybody who wants to see it.
Or 47 if you wanted to be at the median.
Okay.
I have a question. Is there a rainy day fund?
For us, no. No, so there are some districts that in cooperation with their municipality, they have what's called a non-lapsing fund or a sinking fund or a 2% fund. We don't have that established here. It's something that the council and the board could choose to work on in the future. It's something I actually do recommend. What that allows the board to do is not have to spend our budget down to zero every single year. It lets us be a little more strategic. If we have $62,000 left over, we can put that into the non-lapsing fund and then take it back out with council approval when we need to, I don't know, re-turf the football field or something like that.
Fix another roof.
Exactly.
Alderman Connors?
Thank you. Dr. Gasper, I know you said that 4% of the budget goes to admin. In a corporate environment, that wouldn't be regarded most likely as top-heavy, but in the context of the other towns and cities surrounding us, where does that place us in regards to them?
So just to be clear, it's 4% of the staff, not necessarily the expenditures, it's 4% of total FTE. In my experience, which as I'll speak to, I haven't done that analysis for each school district. It's about typical. It's about typical. I don't find us to be top-heavy or not top-heavy enough. I'm thankful to the board. We've made some changes. We've made some realignments since my arrival that has really let us do some good work. But I think it's about typical in my experience.
Could I just ask, it all boils down to student achievement and student success for you and everybody. And parenthetically, in terms of hearing from John Q. taxpayer, among those taxpayers are parents with elementary school children who told me they're thinking of moving out when they reach middle school or high school, which is very painful for me and everybody, not just me, particularly not me, but others. So there's two sides of the coin to that as we try and arrive at a fair budget that reflects the needs of every city department in the school district. So, but maybe those other people are louder sometimes, but I just want to allude to, in the council deliberations, the council has a public hearing. And I think as all the people we want to see a good public participation at that budget hearing that will occur sometime after the mayor presents her budget on April 10th. How about other questions or comments? Any questions or comments? Let's let Alderwoman Saavedra have the last word.
It definitely doesn't have to be the last word. I think we share some reality, so I just want to put that on the table. We'll see what the mayor presents to the council and then what the council is able to do with that, and it's always a balancing act between how far you could push the taxpayer in raising taxes and versus making, and I do agree that a budget is a moral compass, so to speak, but being on the Board of Education, you have the luxury of singularly focusing on education. Being on the city council, we don't have the luxury of a laser light focus on one area. We have to kind of balance all of that. And when you were talking, I was thinking about your fixed costs that you can't do anything about, your contract costs, your utility costs. That's the same situation the city's in too. We have very similarly number of unions with contracts that are increasing. So we're kind of up against the same reality in terms of costs that we can't do anything about, and then it's looking at our budget and trying to figure out where's the wiggle room. So we have to make kind of a list of, here are all our fixed costs that we can't do absolutely anything about, and then where in the city budget do we have wiggle room that we can do some things with. And in saying that, I just want to say to everybody here, and I don't know even on the council who's aware of it, but we're down almost $6 million in motor vehicle reimbursement from the state. So when I'm looking at your ask for 5-point-something million just to break even, I'm thinking, gee, that number sounds awfully familiar, because that's how much money the state is now saying they're not going to give us in motor vehicle reimbursements based on a fixed mill rate.
As a result of a local decision on the mill rate, yes.
Lowering the mill rate, which we're not going to get into a political discussion because we're here to talk about the Board of Education. But after the meeting, I'd be glad to put the boxing gloves on with you, John. Because let's keep it real, okay? We could sell tickets, and that's how we could fill the $5 million gap for the Board of Education. But that's what I'm thinking about. Not that anything you're asking for is unreasonable. Nothing you're asking for is unreasonable. It's as you're talking about your fixed cost, something the city has, is in that same kind of position. The only difference is you can't raise taxes, so you're stuck, but we can raise taxes. And how far can you push the taxpayer? The only other comment that I'm going to make, and then anyone else who wants to have their last word can, is the difference looking at the DERGs, with the exception of New London that's smaller than us. The other communities in our DERG are bigger and have a broader tax base than New Britain has. So we're in a little bit of a pickle there because we're 13 square miles with 40+% of our properties being non-taxable between the hospitals and the college and our own properties, Park and Recs.
I think you would find Wyndham to be quite similar.
Wyndham is similar.
Wyndham has Eastern Connecticut State University.
Yes, so that's kind of difficult. I am not making excuses. You put your reality on the table, and I'm just going to say we have a reality too. The challenge for the council is going to be, once we get past what our absolute fixed costs are, where is that wiggle room? And that's going to be the challenge for the council, and that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Ms. Santana?
What I just wanted to point out, it was probably just one of those points that Sharon alluded to very early on, I'm sorry, Alderwoman Savetra, very early on. That was something that I think we just all need to take a deep breath and consider. There are children today that are still being diagnosed as we speak, right? So that large chunk of money that we are going to need, that we're not looking at contractual obligation just yet, but that we know we got to pay, right? Because they're the first ones that get their check cut, like that's just it. Right at the beginning of the month, the people that provide services, outside services, inside services, anybody coming in as a vendor. Whatever we're doing, special education costs realistically are going up. And so he has been able to, with his team, strategize and be able to get ahead of it as best as we can. But we have numbers, both in population to our school district, that are going up for whatever the reason, we don't know, but whatever the reason, we have an influx. And then as children who finally are able to see a physician, are able to get diagnosed, now you've got that stamp, you have other services that need to be provided, you now have those additional expenses. So while I do appreciate the role of everyone here at this table who's taken time out of their busy evenings to come in and be able to have this discussion, I thank you all for doing that. I just point out as well, while we're talking about contracts, while we're talking about the children, the uniqueness that we attempt to celebrate every single day is challenged by the fact that we can't afford the celebration. No balloons. No balloons. So,
Okay, thank you. Well, I think, it is, I think the challenge is clear for all of us, and I appreciate those comments. I will just point out that every major city department at the Board of Finance and Taxation, their budget, what they requested was recommended, and what the school district requested was zero. So that's the challenge before us, to pass a fair budget.
And we're here asking.
And we're waiting. I look forward to what the mayor's take on this budget as we get into it next month.
Thank you. Is it what? Is it working?
Battery's going.
Is it working?
Yep, yes, it does.
Well, we all know, I mean, they need money. The school system needs money. It just, but I'm also looking at, again, we were talking about how you have the ones that get suspended, expelled, behind. Those are the ones, actually, to be honest, that we should be taking a look at most. Because those kids, to me, is a product of pandemic. Because the pandemic, when I said it when I was first counseling here, I said the same thing. When the pandemic is over, we're gonna have a problem with our kids. Because socialized, they were, you know, they didn't have the chance to be able to have their social skills, you know, to develop more. Especially, we're looking at Slade and Pulaski. Those individuals came from elementary straight into middle school without even having a chance to develop. And so now I noticed that we're losing 2 social workers, actually technically 3 by next year. And those are the ones that we should be investing in the most. Between the teachers and the social services should be the 2 things that right now that I think that Board Ed should be focusing on. Because a lot of these kids are missing out totally on just the social part of it. They can't even communicate with each other without having a phone or a laptop in front of them, because now they were brought up that way for 2 years. So now that's what they're adopting to. So I know that was what we had to do, because that was the fastest way to kind of adapt to what the situation was going on. But at the moment of time, I'm looking at what we have now for critical issues with the children, besides the ones that haven't been diagnosed yet. I think that we should be really focusing on trying to get this money. I don't know how, even between the state, even advocating the state as much as we've been. I know that the state delegates has been fighting furiously these past couple of years to get the money in from ECS. But at the same time, as a state, I mean, and I've seen towns like Farmington, Avon, their town committees are actually having votes on how to spend money, you know, education. And I see them flocking through those, between Sycamore Park, because that's one of their places. They're flocking through and then passing unanimously about putting money into education. We should be doing the same thing here. I know we don't have the money. I know that we're a tight, you know, 13 miles, square miles, 14 miles, be precise, whatever it is. But at the same time, I think we should be investing more into our children. If you want those, like I said before, if you want those kids to come back here, you have to invest in them now, so that when they say, okay, you want us here, we'll come back. If not, they're going to go to New York, Boston, where they're going now. Even my children, they're looking at Texas. They're looking at all over. Why? Because, again, we're not investing in them now. So they're looking at, they don't feel like they're wanted here. You know, being said, I think right now, I know we got a couple of weeks to think about it, but I think we should definitely be supporting, you know, our education, our kids.
I just want to say.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Piggybacking off of what Board of Ed member Santana said, I work in my secular work as a case manager with people that battle mental diagnoses. And the fact that, thank you for bringing it up, everything that happened through the pandemic, the numbers have risen. And they will, like Tina said, those numbers of children that will be diagnosed will continue to grow, unfortunately, because of the impact that it had on the children. I would not put my children information out here, but I'm thankful that D. Loretto has the Klinberg program. I'm thankful that those kind of programs exist within our school district, but we're in trouble because if these children do not get the attention they need, and like Alderman Santiago said, if we do not give them the inclining that they are wanted, they are important to us, I fear too that they will go to another district because I've gotten offers from my children that are about to graduate in New Britain High School, and they were willing to stay here because we love the city, because we know the city loves us. And I think this budget, as hard as it may be for the city, is the best that we can do thus far. Hopefully in the future we'll get more funding, but, you know.
Thank you. Alderman Simpson, you had,
I just want to ask one more question. Do we understand the budgetary impacts of student expulsion on the school district here?
So the budgetary impact is, compared to when I arrived, is relatively flat. So we used the ESSER money to rehabilitate this building. So now, rather than paying approximately $100,000 in rent, again, we had good partnership from Boys and Girls Club, nothing negative against them. Instead of spending that in rent, we're spending it in our own staff to provide services to kids. So I believe, Ms. Alfano, would you agree that the impact is about flat? But excellent question, thank you. If I may, Mr. Alderman, just wanted to, this is something that the board has heard about perhaps months ago in my weekly update email, but on the question of mental health. So, and on to Mr. Keene's statement earlier about looking for every way to defray costs. So, Mr. Spalding, a couple other members of my team, and I just met in the past 2 days to recruit more services such as Klingberg, as mentioned by Mr. Rivera, inviting more of them into our schools. It's not as good as having our own social workers, but these are services that can be in our schools. We just provide them a space. And those services are then direct billed to either Husky or Medicaid or to a private insurance provider. So again, it's not as good as having our own people. That would be my preference if I had the money. But to offset the impact, we are looking at inviting more of these people in. And it's not an easy process because they actually have some federal regulations, some federal hoops to jump through because there's some federal funding at play. But I'm hoping that that'll be in place for the start of the next school year.
Dr. Gasper, I'm sorry, just made me think of one more thing. I don't have the microphone.
You're working here.
Yeah, I'm just going to.
it's for your listening audience, Sharon, so it's for your listening audience.
School-based health centers.
Yes, ma'am.
Usually have a mental health service component to that. Do our school-based health centers still provide those services?
Where the school-based health clinics are in place, the answer is yes. Mr. Spalding will correct me where I'm wrong.
So can we just run down where we do have school-based health centers?
That's a hard question, but I'll do my best. I believe it's Smalley. It is planned for, Mr. Spalding, you can chime in and help me if you want. Smalley, Gaffney, Pulaski, Slade, where basically, as we are reconstructing our schools, we're building in those spaces.
So I asked that question because I was part of the school building committee, and still John and I are liaisons to that. So I go and I kind of asked a question that I knew the answer to.
I do that too.
Sure that people around the table understand that when we're talking about mental health services,
Right.
And that's not on our dime either. School-based health centers are funded through the state, and we're very lucky that we get them into our schools. And New Britain High School has a very successful one.
Correct.
I'm very pleased with the program over there.
But I would say, just to highlight the dependence on grants, a center was built into the new Chamberlain, but it's not currently in operation because the entity that was going to staff that for us did not receive their grant. So we're
Is that
working.
Community Health Center?
Yes, correct. So we had a meeting about that with Community Health Center earlier this week. We're hoping to reinstate that for the coming year, but again, sometimes it's easy to make the mistake of thinking that grants are cash in hand, and they are not. They always come with strings attached. They're for a particular purpose, and they also come and go. Yeah.
I just think when we're renovating schools and we include that, and the state is between 85 and 95% reimbursing what we
Yes.
spend, it's a good argument to make to them that, we included this in the space and we'd like to see the funding for it. But I did just want my colleagues to understand that we do have those services in some of our schools.
Correct.
To the extent we could expand it, it would be awesome.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Wrap up? I don't see any.
If I may, I would just like to say, any member of the council is welcome to contact my office if you have other questions that occur to you between now and your decision. I'm happy to work with you on getting you further information if you'd like.
All right. Well, it's now 7:30, and hearing no other questions or comments.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned by Alderman Santiago, second by,
Hold on, Ken.
oh, I'm sorry, Alderwoman Scott. Yeah, sorry. How about a microphone?
So I was just wondering if you guys work with the youth services here in New Britain? Because, or is that not a thing? Like the counselor for youth service here in New Britain?
So what I know is where we have school counselors, they're always engaged with a lot of the services from the city. The youth counselor, even services such as PAL, making references where we can to connect kids, not just during the school day, but outside of the school day. Yes.
And I did want to point out the expulsion, that it's actually going well for some of the people that I know that I've spoken to. Going to the smaller environment, that's really a necessity, that we have these smaller environments for some of our kids. They really need it, and they thrive when they're put in those situations. They can do so much better.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I do not enjoy the process of expelling a child. It's an unfortunate duty that I take seriously. But what you say is absolutely true. We've had multiple parents request to have their children stay in the expulsion program because of the smaller environment.
So more funding for that, I think. I don't know if we can.
See Satellite Career Academy go spiking because people want their kids in a smaller environment?
So both Satellite and Brookside are alternative high schools, and they're kind of limited by the size. The board is about to engage in a strategic planning process where I'm going to ask them to think about what should alternative programs look like and how big should they be. I've said this to both Mr. Miramont and Mr. Mayette, the principal of those two schools. I said, how big can Satellite get while still being Satellite? How big can Brookside get while still being Brookside? Now, both would need a new building to get bigger, or some type of reallocation. And of course, staffing that goes along with keeping it feeling like the way they feel. I started my career in a 2,300 student high school. When I started my career, I was a Spanish teacher at Manchester High School, and we were always the third or fourth or fifth largest in the state. It's a very busy place. I know what it feels like to be in a building that has 2,300 kids. And there are many benefits. And actually, I'm starting a new program. I'm having lunch with kids. So this week I had lunch with kids at the high school, and they were really excited about the variety of clubs and sports and activities, and that's the benefit of a large school. If you have a high school with 500 kids, you can't have that many programs. But there's downsides, and the downside is it's a super busy place. If you're a kid who chooses not to engage, it's easy to be a kid who doesn't engage. It's easy to be kind of what, in my generation, we used to call a wallflower, right? I don't think the kids use that term anymore, right? But, so those are the downsides. So I'll be asking the board to think about what do they envision, not only on the kind of the alternative side, but should we also be thinking about kind of a more accelerated path? Should we be looking into, is there a possibility of having alternative high schools for kids who want to go into engineering, or our Ed Rising program? Could kids be spending half of their high school day on the CCSU campus? Things like that. So I think, again, having been in a district with a very large high school, we know, and again, I'm not a resident here, but I know that any talk of a second high school was probably not likely, right? There's land concerns, there's, oh my God, what are we going to do for the marching band concerns? But a way to provide really good services to a lot of kids would be to consider what other kinds of high schools could we have. Smaller ones, alternative ones, kind of across the spectrum. I think that'd be a very interesting thing for me as a superintendent to work on, but I think also for the board to think about. And if you could take the high school from 2,300 down to about 1,800 or 1,700, it'll feel like a different place. And
So-
it'll still be a wonderful place with lots of activities.
So they,
We had two high schools before.
go ahead, John, yes.
We had two high schools before, and I don't know what happened, but we ended up with one big one, you know?
Money problems, same thing.
Well, I know the comprehensive high school has been largely discredited, but New Britain High's been broken down into different houses, and so there's been a decentralization of the larger unit.
Yeah, the staff, they do a good job. They call it cohorts, and it's cohort by kind of
Sure.
projected graduation date. They do what they can.
Yeah.
I was actually in New Britain High School in 2006. I was a visitor on the accreditation visit. And back then, there were 600 or 700 more kids there. But we timed it. You could not walk from what we call the freshman center, or that part of the building, the music suite, to the top corner of the third floor in the allotted time. There's just too much traffic. And I'll say, another thing that we've used the ESSER money for, I believe we've used it wisely, is a very comprehensive facility study district-wide. And what they found about the high school is there's enough square footage to do the job. The trouble is with how the square footage is laid out. It's just not, as it's been added on to over the years, we've just ended up with a physical structure, an architectural structure that's just not very efficient.
Can I just wanted to, in tandem with what Dr. Gasper just said, and I'm sorry I'm taking this past your projected ding.
No, we can go on and on.
I got time. So what I wanted to do is just shout out something that maybe just, went over. We spent the money in the most creative way that we could on our facilities study. So we did the security audit and the facility study. That will allow us in Puerto Rico, we say en la mañana, but it's in the tomorrow, later on.
I know.
Able to, you know what I mean, to be able to access additional funding, because a lot of times that funding stream does not open up to districts who do not have those facility studies and those security audits in place already. And that's just the world that we live in. You want to get the cash, you should have already done the study in your area in order to be able to, show certain areas of opportunity. And he did that. He was able to spend the money creatively doing that so that we would be able to access those funds. No one else has
Well,
that.
yeah. Well, thanks. I've heard the talk, and Joan, in terms of two high schools before my time, I have fond memories of Lynn, Massachusetts, and Lynn Classical and Lynn English playing each other every year. It was the big event, one of the big events. But I hear I was going to ask that question that Joan raised, that we have to do what we can do within our means and abilities at this time, but certainly decentralizing and getting away from that comprehensive high school that you had such a good time in, or not, is something I hope we're moving in that direction. Yeah, all right. Anybody else? Once? Nate Simpson will not let us finish.
Thank you. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for the council and the Board of Ed to do all this work. I know this is a headache, and I don't think anybody's winning in this budget, but that's because of monies that will just come and go. But I was wondering, just because we're talking about second high school, maybe diversifying education opportunities, is there an opportunity to collaborate with the technical high school system?
My blunt answer is typically no. My off the record, I know we're being recorded right now, so it's on the record, answer is, I see them as a friendly rival. I'm chagrined or not really proud to say, we recently did a social media post that's our most popular yet. Ryan Langer, our communications officer, said it got 80,000 views. And it was me going all around the high school saying, this is New Britain High School, this is New Britain High School. My goal is to play offense and keep them in our schools. So we've moved up our parent welcome to the high school to earlier on purpose, before people start making their decision about the magnet schools and about the technical schools. I want that, what was it, Ms. Alfano, 2.9 million that we pay in tuition to go down. If you look at the offerings at the high school, I fully believe they rival any magnet school. And if you look at our academies at the high school, kids are leaving there with technical skills. They're leaving with CNA certificates. They can go right into the medical field. They're having paid internships that I will put up against any CREC school. And my goal is to get, first, us, our staff, people here, to believe in New Britain Public Schools, perhaps maybe in a way that they haven't in a while, because I believe it's deserved. It's about changing our belief in ourselves first, and then I think those families who are thinking about magnet schools, it's not going to change. It's going to change 5 people at a time, and then 20 people at a time, and then 100 people at a time. It'll change over time. When I interviewed for this job, as Mr. Kane mentioned earlier, I told the board this was 3 to 5 years of work, and we're at about year 1.5 right now. With all due respect, I don't want to collaborate with the technical schools. I want to beat them. I want to beat them at their game, because I think we can, and I think perhaps we already are, but people just don't believe it yet.
All right. Back to that, I'll be one of the parents to admit that I sent all 3 of mine to EC. The reason why is, it's crowded. Again, for other people, you might feel comfortable, having that kind of environment. But me growing up I'm from Newark, New Jersey, and that's, we had a separate ninth grade school, and then we had the 10, 9, 12, because of how much the population was. So they had to separate just one class, just so that they were able to teach. So I think that, to me, was that the idea was that, again, I looked at my kids, their social skills, and I said, well, I don't think that that school is going to be able to handle their personalities, to be honest. So, and then I look at a lot of if you look at the percentage of EC going students, I think it's almost over 50% of them is New Britain residents. And that's why I think it's important, like you're saying, that we should somehow collab a little bit, just so that way those kids still feel like they're in New Britain. Even though they're literally in New Britain, we got innovation, and you have all these schools around my neighborhood. That's my neighborhood. And I'm like, okay, why are we not tapping into these schools? Because I think from last year or so, their innovation was willing to offer up that school to the school system. I heard about it from the state side, but I guess there was some money issues that was not going to be at. But I was like, well, that would have been great, another high school in New Britain, because I think that New Britain needs another high school. As much as you want to say it needs it. It needs to at least halfway, meet one side over here, and I think that's the way it was before, New Britain High School, and then you had Pulaski was the other school. I think it's important that we look into that too, another school for the high school, or even like you're saying, smaller little wings. The problem is what we have for property to do that, right? That's the problem. Again, the same thing with businesses. We don't have room for businesses. But I guess even what Jack Benjamin is doing, where he's allowing some of the residential areas to be businesses, which will help somewhat, bring something in. But I really think that we should somewhat tap into some of those crack schools or whatever that's in our school system, just to kind of, I'm not saying that you take what they're offering, but just the communications, you know what I mean, with the other kids, because again, there's a reason why they're sent over there, right? And we want to ask those parents, what is it? And like I told you, for me, it was the social part. I was definitely worried that they might get lost up in there or get in trouble, or, you know what I mean? And so I decided to put them in EC. Graduated? All 3 of them did. Happy to say they all 3 graduated. That was the most important part of my whole parenting, was they graduate. That's the only thing I asked them, graduate. And they did that. And they did it with high honors, which is, something that I don't know if, I'm not taking away from New Britain High School. I don't know if they would have been able to do that there. You know what I mean? But some people did. Same here. Yep.
Well done.
I'm gonna debate you on that, only because I was a parent who did not believe in the New Britain school system. I put all three of my daughters in magnet schools. When I did that, I saw my children lose their socialization. They were losing a lot of the friends that they went to elementary school with. In the 10th grade, my two older daughters who played basketball wanted to come back to New Britain. What did they do? They purposely failed at the magnet school to get kicked out. I was afraid, like Cisco, that my children would not excel at New Britain High. The very first day they had their lunch break, my daughter sent me a video from the school. I freaked out. The crowd. The only thing I told them, I said, mind your business and get to your next class. My children, I will say, loved New Britain High, all three of them. All three of them graduated. All three of them. The thing about New Britain High is the diversity. They learned and they were exposed to more diversity than they were going to the magnet schools. We knock New Britain High. I graduated from New Britain High. My sister graduated from New Britain High. My cousins, my friends. But I do fear that kids will get lost. I do fear that kids will get lost because of the bigness of the school. And if somebody will play the Mega Million tonight and that Powerball, and if you do hit it, please give half of that to the New Britain school system. Please, I urge you. Because I am.
Oh, they need to consider, necesitamos dinero.
I love New Britain. I love New Britain. I went to the New Britain school system. I've seen schools close and get overcrowded. I've seen schools be rebuilt for the better. I've seen schools collaborate. I've seen schools combine. My children went to Smalley School. They got combined into De Loretto. My children went to Pulaski. I took them out. With Hartford. But I brought them back. The thing is that I brought them back to where they belong. And I think that was the best decision I ever made for my children. It exposed them to the rough and tough, the book smarts. You know, they didn't lose at anything by coming back to the Britain High. They didn't lose anything. Jason knows.
All right, so, all right, I'm just going to advocate for New Britain Public Schools. Because my youngest daughter, she graduated in 2022. She's currently at Central Connecticut State University, but she's a junior. And she's a junior because they took 20 of her credits that she earned at New Britain High School. And I will challenge anybody. I mean, what gets the bad rep about New Britain High School is go to awards night, go to scholarship night, and it's in that same building that I believe over $1 million of scholarships is being awarded. And it's right. Some people may be hesitant to send their kids. I'm one of 10. I'm number 7 out of 10. We all went to public schools and we all succeeded. And that's why I believed in the public schools, and that's why I sent my daughter there. They wanted to send her to correct, they wanted to send her anything, and I believe that what she knew. And one of the things we told her, you better know that you was raised right. And that was one of the things that got her through that. But I will challenge anybody to take a look at the schools that in our surrounding towns, but take a look at the courses that are offered. The AP courses, the academies that are being built, she's really reversed, just like me. I don't say too much. But she excelled, and she achieved, and a lot of her friends achieved as well. And just to say, but she also challenged herself, right? So going into her freshman year, I believe she was ranked 49. She challenged. She said, I'm going to be the valedictorian. She didn't get it, but she came out ranked number 4. And that was good enough for that.
All right, 7:49. I'm going to try this one more time, but I would say a couple of years ago, the valedictorian was a Muslim student who said she went to suburban school, maybe it was Sharon, but came back to New Britain where she felt at home about the, I don't know if anybody was listening a couple of years ago, but I did, I wrote something about it. But that's the strength, what our strength is, and so I'm sure we can, I was informed by the meeting tonight, and we have our work and challenges cut out for us, but we should put our heads together and try and adopt a fair budget as fair as we can for the schools. So thanks, Dr. Gasper, and
Thank you all for
the
listening.
board, council. 7:50, a motion. Go for it, yes. Adjourn. Second? Yeah. Second. All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you all. Please contact me with questions.
It would be the opposite.
Thank you all.
I'm not good at speaking. I am not good at speaking. I'm still shaking from just having that conversation.